Jason Van Genderen, thank you so much for joining me on Finding Hope this week. Really excited to chat to you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to have a conversation.
Now, normally I would start an episode by asking you to tell me a little bit about yourself, but I feel like this story is a little bit bigger than you. So I want to start by asking you to tell me a bit about your mum, Hendrika.
So, yeah, my mum Hendrika is, the quintessential Dutch matriarch. Very strong, very protective, very loving. She was always the organizer of the family. She was always the source of entertainment. She managed everything in the family, as a lot of mums do, and had lived in Australia for longer than what she'd lived in Holland. Emigrated out here in the 50s, started a family, and became part of the community, and lived very happily. Loved people, squeezy, huggy person. You'd sort of meet her for the first time, and she'd latch onto you and hold you and give you a hug like she knew you forever. She's just one of those old souls you meet that just seems to be a real people person, just knows you. And she's always just been just a wonderful friend, I think, in life. I've always had a great relationship with her all through life, and been really protective of her as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know so much of your memories of her and so many stories are wrapped up in these home videos that you've filmed throughout the years.
Mm.
But from my understanding, it wasn't because of your mum that you first started filming home videos, right?
Yeah, I'm one of those serial dads in the family that's always filming everything. But I do also happen to have a filmmaking background, so I can be forgiven for that, I think. But my kids are always like saying, "Dad, put your phone away," Da, da, da. I love documenting. I think for me, capturing moments of everyday family life are really, really important. And it really, I guess, the clarity point for me um, came. Wow, that would have been around 12 years ago when we lost my father to cancer, and we knew he was not going to be long with us, and so I started documenting my parents' story. So both Oma and my dad together, mum and dad together on the couch for a day. I started interviewing them about their life, their relationship, their careers, all sorts of stuff. Anything that I wanted to ask them, that I wanted to make sure we had captured for history's sake in the family, and did that, and inadvertently realized that through that interview with my dad, who we knew we were about to lose, the one thing we didn't realize is we were about to lose my mum's mind. So I had captured this beautiful interview of both my parents being really fluid in conversation pre-dementia. And that really became a super important, story to have in our family. And certainly as years progressed and my mum was living on her own, she became more dependent on us for help, and dementia presented itself and was diagnosed. And then we ended up encouraging her to sell the house and come and live with us as a family. And when we bought a home together, we lived together for almost 5 years and kept documenting, because I realized that her story was something we really wanted to celebrate and remember. And we started sharing those stories on Facebook. We found a huge community of support around that, and then one day said, maybe there's a bigger story in this.
Yeah, yeah, and there definitely is, and we will get to talking about the documentary really soon. I want to talk a little bit about that process of your mum kind of moving in, living together. How did you balance your mum still maintaining independence, but
Mm.
also obviously needing a great deal of help, especially towards the end?
Yeah, look, mum, it became increasingly obvious that my mum needed us um, around her more than what I could do by just going and visiting her one day a week. She couldn't drive. She never learned to drive a car, for instance. So my dad was always the person that would ferry them around from spot to spot for shopping and events and things like that. So, I mean, and it's quite manageable to live in a home on your own when you're surrounded by public transport, and when you've got the confidence to use public transport and things like that. What we started realizing with Oma was that she wasn't really that confident using transport. She wasn't really picking up the phone and booking a taxi to go somewhere. She'd sit at home and wait until the following Friday that I was there with her, and then go and do those things together. And she started having a few falls and started becoming a bit forgetful. And then we realized that there was a, she needed a bit more assistance from the family than just that weekly visit. And it was a huge shift for us. It was a massive shift, with we had a home with both young kids and older kids as well. We're a blended family, and it was a big ask on everyone to sort of open up and make space for Oma to come and live with us. But she was always such a, she was always so happy and compliance a horrible word to say, but just, like agreeable and would fit in with what was going in and around the family. So she slotted in really easily. She had her own little granny flat attached to our family home with an internal door as well. So we always felt super close, but she still had a privacy of, her own space, her own furniture, her own TV she could watch. She could cook her own meals at the start, and she wanted that. It was more just about being closer together in the same space so that you'd see someone you knew every day. You could have conversation. We'd have cups of coffee together. We'd have a couple of meals together during the week as well. But it was just that, the daily transactional stuff that you miss when you're living on your own, just the other conversations in the house, which I think is the thing that we really grew to love. And I know she gained a lot from. Um, so yeah, it was very easy to start with. It grew harder gradually as the dementia sort of increased her needing to rely on the family to support her. And it's the same. Look, this is a path walked by so many families all around the country, with anyone with high care needs. In a palliative condition, you're going to increase your workload, and there's going to be more falls, and there's going to be more trips to the hospital and more trips to the doctor, and it's just that constant adjustment, getting used to those things, learning to cope and learning to understand what you can help with yourself and what you need external help with.
Yeah, definitely, and that is the balancing act that is so difficult.
Mm.
Um, I want to talk about COVID because during lockdown, that's when I saw one of the viral videos of you taking your mum out on a date, which
Yeah, yeah.
divine. Um, but how difficult was it? How much did your mum comprehend about COVID and lockdown? How did you manage to kind of explain that to her in terms that she'll understand? How was that process?
Yeah, that was tricky. Look, COVID was not a, the pandemic in general was just not something that she really could get a grip on or understand. And so I think when we went into lockdown, that was an hourly conversation with Oma at home as to why the front door was locked, why she couldn't just go off wandering down into the street. I mean, that was because of falls as well, but she didn't understand why we weren't going for the daily trip down to the cafe to have her morning coffee and to meet the locals, as she was used to doing every morning. Couldn't understand why shopping was off the cards. Couldn't understand why we just weren't going to places. And it is tiring. Yeah, it's very hard to have that conversation every hour, all the time when you go in. You need to remind, but um, we did our best, and yeah, I think, yeah, we would continually put little signs around her home as well with little illustrations and little messages about the fact why we're all staying at home, reinforcing the fact that we were at home, not just her, that we were working from home as well, that the kids weren't going to school, that we're all at home because of the virus outside. Megan had a great way. My wife Megan had a wonderful way of explaining it to her one day. She said, it's like a war with sickness outside the house. So think of it like a war. And she could imagine what war was like because she'd lived through World War II as a child. So, that was something she could actually understand. And, she would watch the news, and we're never quite sure how much of that sank in with her. But we know she felt safe at home. We know she felt supported by having the family around her, and increasingly as we found more kind of whimsical ways to keep ourselves entertained amidst the cabin fever of isolation. We found increasingly more playful ways to involve her in life at home, and still and create situations that spoke to her reality, not ours, and then filmed them and started making little stories out of those.
Yeah, it's awesome. How important was it during those months, especially to keep some sort of routine?
Are critically important, hugely important, not just for us. I mean, I didn't realize how much important routine was to me, let alone what it was like to Oma. for someone with a cognitive impairment, routine is absolutely critical because um, it's your markers in the day. It's how you measure time. It's how you work out your flow of activity and what you're going to do. And for her, she always had an eye on the clock. She was very aware of the time. She was surrounded with lots of clocks, and at certain parts of the day, there were certain things that she knew little marks she would hit. To prepare herself for the rest of the day, she'd start peeling her potatoes for a dinner at like 10 o'clock in the morning. Dinner prep was already started straight after morning coffee. It was like straight away thinking about the evening meal, getting things together. Yeah, really, really critically important. And I think that was one of the things that Megan and I really noticed at the beginning of lockdown was by restricting her routines and removing the things like shopping and stuff like that from outside of the house. It was really affecting her confidence and her happiness and um, her place in the world. She felt like those things were taken away from her, and she couldn't really understand and balance why. So we knew that if we could sort of speak to that need, and if we could create a bit of a make believe environment where we could create, for instance, a grocery shopping store at home. We created a clothes boutique at home for her when we had to go clothes shopping. We did as much as we could to try and reproduce the outside world or bring the outside world into the house for her to still experience and do those sorts of things. And I know Artie and Megan had like dress up, they had like a hairdresser salon at home on different times. Whenever Oma had to get a hair washed or a haircut, we'd create a little shop out of it. All those little things, just so it felt like a process of going somewhere, doing something, putting a jacket on, coming into another room in the house, experiencing something, and then going back into a granny flat again. And for us, they were kind of just little family moments that we enjoyed doing, and we'd record them on the phone, and we could play them back to her the next minute, the next hour, whenever she needed to see it. And then we shared them online and found that other people connected with those stories as well, and found that they saw little pieces of their own frustrations in their family and lockdown, sort of either unpicked or creatively solved in these little videos. And yeah, it was really beautiful to find a whole community out there of people that just warmed to those stories and kept encouraging us to make more as well.
Yeah, and it's awesome. And you can find all of those videos on the Facebook page, Omar's Applesauce. It is just your heart will be warmed, I guarantee it. Um, how did your kids love having their Oma around? I can imagine it just would have been such a joy for a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone that's had the pleasure of seeing kids with just conversing with people with dementia is a beautiful thing. We as adults tend to wrap a lot of complexity in our conversations and our expectations of, when we sit down for a meal time, we want to have a nice little riveting conversation about something. We entertain one another. I watch Artie, our 6-year-old, and Oma sit down, a 6-year-old and an 86-year-old sitting down having a meal together without the need for words. And yet they're completely in each other's space. They look at each other, they exchange glances. It's a little giggle, it's a smile, it's a reassuring tap on the hand, it's playing with something on the plate. And then the other one mirrors it. There's so much unspoken gold between what Megan and I watched our kids relate to Oma with. And I think as parents, they taught us so much about caring and love just through their language of how they lived with Oma. And Megan and I were just talking about this morning. How incredible was, you can't. There's certain things you can't teach children. They just need to experience and see and live. And to have watched Artie develop his own language with Oma. As a child speaking to someone trying to get a point across, to speak slowly, use simple language, have pause in the conversation, and then he uses touch, like he'd reach out his hand and he'd hold Oma's arm when he's speaking with her, and he'd point to his mouth to make sure that she was partially lip reading as well at times. You know, he had all of these cues and he knew instinctively what to do to create a bond with her, and he'd have patience for it. And they're beautiful things. They're just such beautiful qualities, and I think there's a lot we can learn from kids that can help unpick the complexities that we wrap into conversation as adults.
Yeah, it's so That's so beautiful, and there are so many joyous moments for sure. I want to talk about the challenging parts as well because
Mm,
I feel like that's navigated so well in the documentary. The inevitable frustrations that you and Megan were
yeah.
feeling about the situation. Um, can you talk a little bit about the impact that this had on your relationship?
Yeah, well, I mean, you'll see in the film that it's not just all happy clappy, right? We also turn the camera in on the more challenging things that happen in the house, and that was part of us, I guess, making sure that not only are we're being completely transparent about a journey like this, but also wanting to validate the journeys of so many people in homes all around the country that are living this journey themselves. And we documented so many things. We documented, there's an argument between Megan and I in the kitchen one morning about Oma's cat. The little trivial stuff in life that you just get caught up on as a couple. And when you're under a stressful situation, it just blows up into this big, big thing. And Megan just picked up her phone and started capturing this conversation, and it made its way in the film. But it was important for us to do that because we want to be real, and we want people to see pieces of their life and their story reflected and mirrored inside our own. And just that's life, right? Life is messy and beautiful and loving and challenging, and all those different things combined together. And so we felt really comfortable using the camera to capture all sides of the story. Our iPhones kind of became like a character in the film or a character in the family, because we knew we were so used to sharing what was going on that we just capture stuff because it was part of our journey. And once we knew that we had a responsibility to an audience to capture that as well, we needed to make sure that we did that, really meaningfully and intentionally.
Yeah, and it's done so well. Eventually, as your mum's condition kind of worsened, the videos that were posted on Facebook kind of slowed and then eventually stopped. Can you explain
Mm.
the reasoning behind that? Because I think it's really important.
Yeah, yeah, it is really important. Yeah, we'd always set in place three pretty clear boundaries as a family behind what we felt was fair to share and what was crossing the line of respect and consent with Oma. So the three values we had as a family have before we share any part of our story. One is that scene made with love or something else. If it wasn't made with love, it didn't deserve a place to be shared. Secondly, did that moment in the story help educate or place context around living with dementia, the challenges that's facing, and also that life as a carer? Did it help educate and increase people's appreciation or understanding of what that might be like? The third thing was, and the most important one of all, is really a consensual one, which is how would Oma have responded to this part of the story when she was fully cognitive? Would she have looked and appreciated that part of the story as something? Would it have repelled her, or would she have leaned into it and said, "Oh, that understood it," or laughed with it, or cried with it, whatever that might be? What would her instinctive reaction to that kind of a part of the story have been? And that carried us all the way through everything we made, from our Facebook videos right through to every scene in the film, and the whole crew that was working on the film from a post production sense knew those three things were very important to us, and that every decision was made based on those three things.
Yeah, it's really important. Now, eventually, as is the case with Alzheimer's, vascular dementia, any form of dementia, it
Mm,
gets progressively worse. There is no getting better, and
correct.
eventually sorry, eventually your mum's condition worsened to the point where she couldn't remain in your home anymore. What
Yeah.
was the point? Was there a point, or was it a gradual thing where you realized that you needed to transition her to high care?
Yeah, look, our experience, and again, I just want to, recognize the fact that everybody's journeys with dementia is slightly different, and I don't. My shared experience is not everybody's or another person's shared experience. I can only speak from our own, but we found there came a point in Oma's health where um, the hospital trips were increasing. the falls were increasing, and she was getting to a point where, and quite rapidly so, where home was not the safest thing for her anymore. Because she was requiring around the clock care, which meant that Megan and I ended up having to do shifts, even sleeping throughout the night. And for anyone listening that's got a young family, you'll well know how challenging that is with young kids waking during the night as well. And then you've got someone at the other end of the house that's also waking, going to the toilet, all manner of all throughout the night. So we were doing 2 hour shifts and sleeping, and you can manage that for maybe days. You're not going to be able to manage that for weeks. So we had exhausted all the help we could utilize in home, and we were surrounded by a fantastic community of carers that came to support us at home, and some people that came at the end and help with overnight sleepovers as well. But it wasn't long term sustainable, and we realized that we needed to find a better solution, not only for Oma, but for the family as well. We couldn't neglect our kids, and Megan and I couldn't neglect each other in a relationship. We needed to be able to be present in each other's space as well. So, um, we ended up making the call. We spoke with a wonderful lady by the name of Danielle Robertson, who connected us with the ability to go and look at a few homes and assess and weigh up what was important. And we settled on one aged care community close to our home, only 7 minutes away, where we could basically theme the room like a room in Oma's house. It was a nice, beautiful big room. And we knew that we could make that Oma's home. She had a little balcony. She overlooked a garden, all the things that were important to her. And we set about making that her new home. Initially as respite care, and then eventually it was her permanent home.
Yeah, and it seemed like, or at least in the documentary, it seemed like that was a really positive transition for Oma as well as the family, because I know
Yeah,
that often aged care facilities are for a lot of people, and the experiences can be suboptimal at best, but it
yeah,
seems like it
yeah.
was it was a really positive space for her.
Yeah, look, I and we when we went touring around the facilities, we found or saw plenty of places that we knew weren't going to be suitable either. And I think it's up to the individual. Different people have different needs and expectations for what's important to them. Um, and I would love, if we can broaden the conversation by sharing this story in this film, if we can help just broaden people's conversations around what's meaningful for our elders when they do reach that stage in life when they need full-time care, and we can work as a community harder towards creating better spaces and making aged care a more supported industry. Our aged care workers are doing an incredible job under very, very, very challenging conditions. um, it really is something, and it's getting a lot of negative press, and people are stretched to the limit. And really, we need to surround those people with love and hope and support, and try and be a part of the solution, part of making those things better, rather than as a community constantly critiquing, how challenging and how tough these spaces are. We can make them as individuals, we can make them better. And families are an equal part in that, is in working with aged care facilities and working with the industry to make it a more supportive and more inclusive experience for our elders.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about the documentary because it is wonderful, a real compilation of the best and worst of this journey.
Mm.
Why did you decide to actually make this into, one piece?
Well, essentially, just the community that came to us. So by having that Oma's applesauce community on Facebook with those small stories that we'd shared, we quickly attracted well over 100,000 people on that Facebook page. I often joke to people, it's taken me, I don't know how many years on Facebook to get 3,000 followers. And there's, my mum who doesn't even know how to use Facebook, and all of a sudden, bang, 100,000 followers. It's classic line. But, for the right reason. She's just such an incredibly, enigmatic person, and her story was so important to share. It was those conversations on that page. It's that community that surrounded us with love and support, um, that made us realize that we had this great opportunity to tell a more serious, a mainstream story. I mean, something that people would go and see in their local cinemas, for instance. Um, Something that maybe paints dementia in a slightly different portrait. We're very used to seeing very stereotyped imagery when it comes to conditions like dementia, and I think it was really important for us to maybe try and peel some of those layers back and show some alternate perspectives, um, while still being truthful to the journey that we've lived.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, what would you want people to understand about caring for someone with dementia? I know that the stories and journeys are so varied. Yeah, what would you want people maybe to better understand about the journey?
I think we need to really be aware that dementia in our society is growing exponentially, and at the moment, there's a lot of research being done, but we're not finding a lot that's going to change the numbers in the short term. So most of our families, most people listening to this are going to experience someone close to them that has dementia. The one thing I would really encourage people to embrace is to not turn away. And whether that meant turning away from the person or turning away from the family, it's really, really important to give yourself the opportunity to learn new skills, learn new patience and new love, and remember that that person that's losing pieces of themselves doesn't deserve to lose you in the process as well. So by opening your heart to that process of care, you can do it. We can all do it. I never thought I'd be able to, um, give up my career and become, a co-carer with Megan of Oma. It is indeed probably one of the most challenging, but also one of the most enlightening experiences I've ever had in my life. And if I had to play that chapter of life all over again, I absolutely would do it exactly the same way, because there's something beautiful about helping someone in that stage of their life, and the things that we learn about each other are really, really uh, life affirming. And that's something that we really wanted to celebrate in the documentary as well, which is that whole idea is using the lens of dementia as a teacher, what it taught us as a family about each other and about how we could live and cohabit together was incredible. And if any of that can rub off onto other families, then even if it changes one family's direction, to me that's completely worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jason, it has been such a pleasure having you on the podcast today. We started this episode with your mum. I want to end it with your mum as well. She lost her battle in February of this year, but she has impacted thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions more people than I think she ever realized. Um, how do you best like to remember her?
Well, I just love to remember her as the fact that even when she was losing her mind, she gave our family the greatest gift of love. And we found each other as a family through losing her. And I think, if there's any more selfless thing in the world, like that is it. Love is love. And it's one of the end lines in the film. Unlike a memory, love lasts forever. And I think she proved to us that love can last forever, even when you're losing your memory. So yeah, that to me is the memory I hold of Oma. And I feel incredibly privileged that we've got the ability to share the story now with other people, and hope that we create more meaningful conversations around that space at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it has been a privilege for me having you on the podcast today. Jason Van Genderen, thank you so much. All the best with the cinema screening and release of this documentary, Everybody's Omar. I think it's going to touch a lot of people.
Thanks, Georgia. Wonderful to chat with you.